The hype around the Washington Commanders is widespread. It's loud, but it's not too much for the team to handle or more than the players can handle. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I'm your host, David Harrison, here with you Monday through Friday, your eyes, your ears, your friend on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders, doing that for WUSA9.com, also doing it for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. I want to thank you for coming through for today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Every dayers, those of you who come through every single day, a special thank you to you, as always, for doing so and being so consistent. All of you, what we're going to talk about today, mailbag time on Locked On Commanders this week. Too much hype around the Washington Commanders. Is it possible that there's too much excitement about the 2025 team? We're going to talk a little bit about fantasy football, and we're going to get into some surprise trade candidates. Have a little bit of fun here at the end of the episode. If you're new to the show, definitely a little bit more of a professional vibe, right? But we do like to have a little bit of fun. I thank you for coming through, for giving it a try. Hopefully you like it. Locked On Commanders is a daily podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So if you do, please make sure you come back again real soon. Everybody out there, if you're not already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. So mailbag time here on Locked On Commanders. Again, as usual, the insiders sent so many great questions, and we've got 2 episodes worth of questions. I think in season, we may just have to do bonus episodes, so like a double drop on Wednesday, because we don't have as much time. But here in the off season, we can just extend it out. We'll do a Wednesday mailbag, probably looking at a Thursday mailbag. Might have some news coming down a little bit, so we might have to push it to a Friday mailbag. We'll see how things develop. But either way, we got a lot of really good questions. We're going to dive right in here. Insider Michael says this: the hype around the team is insane. Even at the national level, there's a growing expectation that this team goes all the way, or at least repeats to the NFC Championship game. But is there too much hype? Are expectations going to be set unreasonably high? And how does this affect young players like Jayden Daniels? I think it's a really great question, because we talk about pressure in this game. We talk about momentum in this game. There was actually a week where I asked Joe Witt Jr., I asked Cliff Kingsbury, I asked Dan Quinn, all 3 of them, if they believed in momentum from a game standpoint, a game-to-game, week-to-week standpoint. And all 3 men basically said, yeah, their momentum is real in some way, shape, or form here. So if that's the case, the Washington Commanders, in one hand, have a lot of momentum coming into 2025, right? Nobody expected them to win even more than 8 games, at least nobody outside the Commanders fan base and some of the media members. And they go out there and they rip off 12 regular season wins, make a deep playoff run, get to the NFC Championship game. Now, in that way, they almost have a little bit of less momentum, because got their butts kicked in the NFC Championship game. Let's just be real about it, against the Philadelphia Eagles there in the link to end the season. So that kind of killed a little bit of the momentum, right? But they still have a lot of good mojo working here. Now, this year, bringing back some of the players they were to bring back. Bobby Wagner didn't retire. He's back. Zach Ertz didn't retire. He's back. The entire coaching staff is back. No coordinators lost. No key positional coaches lost. A bunch of them got interviews, and that's great, but they all either decided to come back, or teams that, you know what, let's go see it out there for another year before we go jump in the shark here a little bit. So it's great. The continuity is going to be there. The energy is going to be there. All of it's going to be there. And I think that it's all leading to a lot of people expecting that what happened in 2024 is really just a taste. So you look at the National Football League itself, just the league itself. So we all came into 2024 saying, can the Washington Commanders be this year's Houston Texans, right? Remember, the Houston Texans in 2023 had the number 2 overall pick. They drafted a quarterback. They ended up winning their division. The Commanders didn't win the division, but the Commanders made a much deeper run into the playoffs than the Houston Texans did on the AFC side. Now, in 2024, the Texans' second season under their head coach, under their rookie quarterback, didn't get nearly the national love in their schedule that the Commanders got. Now, I think some of that is because the Commanders made the deep run that they did, unseeded the number 1 team in the NFC in the playoffs, again, faced off against Philadelphia Eagles, beat a division champion as well. So when you kind of look at it in that perspective, the Commanders did more than the Texans did in their impressive debut season. So that, and also the roster stability, the coaching staff stability, I think all of that kind of plays into, again, the Washington Commanders 10 times this season. they're either going to have the full attention of the football watching community, or they're going to have a large share of the attention of the football watching community. Not all primetime games, of course, they're limited to 6. They've got 5. So the NFL's already positioning themselves to be able to flex the Commanders into a 6th primetime game later in the season. So the league is buying into the hype. So again, the question is it too much hype? I'm going to say this. No, it's not. For Jayden Daniels specifically, it is not too much hype. Why? Because this is a guy who knows what it's like to play in spite of the expectations. And even when the expectations are good, I think as a player on the field, you have to play in spite of the expectations. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad expectations. You have to go out there and play in spite of them. Because if you steer into either the negative expectations, you're going to go out there and try to do too much. You're going to take too many risks. And you're going to put yourself and the ball and the team in danger. If you go out there trying to prove everybody right, kind of the same thing, right? You're bound to do too much. You're going to try too hard. You're going to try and make the hard play instead of the good play. So really, no matter what side of the scale the expectations come in on, you've got to out there as a player play in spite of them. And Jayden Daniels knows what it's like to have the expectations about him. Played in Arizona State to start his career. I'm a Sun Devil. I know what it's like to know that nobody expects anything from your football team, even when you have really good players. I remember Brandon Ayuk was there. Eno Benjamin was there. All these good players are there. Jayden Daniels himself as well. Like, Sun Devil fans were excited about Jayden Daniels. Not a lot of national fans excited about Jayden Daniels. And then when he leaves the school, we all remember the infamous video. I'm not going to rehash it all right now, but there's some negativity there. Goes to LSU. Now people are like, okay, but you got to prove it now. You're in the SEC. Like, this is big boy football. You got to prove it now. So there's some expectations that he's not going to be able to prove it because look where he came from. And there's some expectations to, well, you just have to prove yourself, and you've got to prove yourself to me. Jayden didn't worry about any of that. He went and played his style of game. Then he becomes a Heisman favorite, goes out there and says, you know what? We're going to do what we need to do. Remember, Jayden actually talked about the game before his Florida game in his final year at LSU. I don't remember the exact order, but Florida game was the game that really, I don't want to say put him on the map because he was already there, but really kind of solidified his Heisman favoritism. But the game before that, Jayden admitted, not a great game for him. And in fact, he came out of the game before that thinking, my Heisman hopes are probably over. He came into that game against the Florida Gators, and this is a microcosm of what we're talking about, but he came into that Florida Gators game pretty much thinking the Heisman is probably over for me. But he could have come out there saying, I need to go get my candidacy back. But he didn't. He came out there, he played his game, played against the Gators, none of the expectations, didn't play against the hype, didn't play against the Heisman Trophy race, played against the Gators, and he whooped their butts to the point where he got right back in the Heisman Trophy race, eventually wins the Heisman Trophy. Number 2 overall pick. A lot of expectations there. He was asked in training camp what it felt like to be the star quarterback of the Washington Commanders. He flat out said, I'm not a star quarterback. I'm a rookie. I haven't done anything yet. All throughout the season, there are moments where you look at Jayden and he gets asked, how are you going to react to this moment? And Jayden always said, look, this is football. The moment doesn't really matter. Like, the moment is the moment. It's a story. It's the attention. It is what it is. But that's not what's going to impact me on the field. And you hear players say it all the time. And then sometimes you see players go out there and you're like, the moment kind of impacted you. But with Jayden, time and time again, even if the moment impacted him for a little bit, right? Like, first game ever against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, looked a little bit like a rookie. But you look at him and you still see the poise in the decision-making, the intelligence behind the decision-making. First primetime game showed up. First division rivalry showed up. First playoff game showed up. Jayden Daniels has already shown, and when he says the moment does not influence what happens on the field, he means it, and it's real. So no, I don't think it's too much for Jayden Daniels. Then you also look at Dan Quinn and his coaching staff, and their intent, their directed efforts to making sure that every week is the same. When they come to work on Wednesday, it's going to be this. When they come to work on Thursday, it's going to be this. Doesn't matter if we're playing primetime. Doesn't matter if we're playing the best team in the league or the worst team in the league. Every week, when you come to work, you know what to expect. The environment never changes, no matter what the situation is. That's massive. And then you look at the veterans on this team. Bobby Wagner, Super Bowl champ. Zach Ertz, Super Bowl champ. Deebo Samuel, Super Bowl experience. Terry McLaurin, a guy who doesn't shrink away from any situation, good or bad. Laramie Tunsil's been around the block more than a few times. Jonathan Jones, coming from the Patriots. I know he's not a star Patriot player necessarily, but he's coming from the Patriots, a franchise that breathes, eats, and lives off of expectation. Dietrich Wise Jr., same thing. You've got a lot of people on this team that know what it's like. Some of these players come from the Dallas Cowboys organization where It's very simple. Even though they haven't won a Super Bowl since the 90s, if you're a Dallas Cowboy and you don't win Super Bowl, you're a failure. Bottom line. So these guys know what it's like to deal, live, and thrive with this adversity. And yes, hype can be adversity as well. So no, I don't think the hype is too much. I don't think they can't handle it. I think that this team is very well equipped to handle the hype. Now, while we're all riding this wave of excitement, or maybe trying to pump the brakes a little bit if you don't believe me, let's shift gears to something that's already got people tweaking their mock drafts, tweaking their strategies, debating their sleeper picks. That's fantasy football, and that's next right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't stop when the clock hits 5. You're already thinking ahead, just like Commanders fans, wondering if this team can actually live up to the hype. Whether you're building rosters or building a business, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and connect with qualified candidates all in one place. Their tools help you quickly write job descriptions and reach the right people with smart candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find and hire high quality employees. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Continuing now, today's mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders. We just talked about the hype surrounding the Washington Commanders. Is it too much? Do we think the players and the coaching staff can handle it? Again, very, very emphatically, I feel like this team, this roster, even the young guys can certainly handle the excitement going on around them. Segment number 2 here, we're going to start off with Jamal, who came through with a fantasy football question. Want to know the fantasy impacts of incoming running backs and wide receivers. So Jamal, I am a fantasy football enthusiast. I do not play Dynasty. I do not play daily. Well, I play daily in the form of betting on FanDuel. I guess that's fantasy football, right? But I play a season-long redraft league. Every year we redraft. We don't have keepers. Everybody goes back into the pool, all that stuff. I don't know what order I'm picking in yet, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I like Fantasy Pros. Fantasy Pros is one of my favorite sites, especially during the offseason, get some early research going. I try to make my own opinions and assumptions and then kind of use Fantasy Pros to support or give me something else to think about when it comes to my decisions. Of course, you can always tune in to Locked On Fantasy Football. Highly, highly recommend that as well. So start off with Jayden Daniels, right? Jayden Daniels right now rated as an elite, quote unquote, quarterback, expected to be drafted in the first 3 rounds. I got him in the 9th round last year. So it kind of shows you the difference that a year can make for a player. So he's kind of in that tier along with Josh Allen of Buffalo Bills, defending MVP, Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, yearly MVP candidate, Joe Burrow, the Cincinnati Bengals, and Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. Personally, I probably put Jalen Hurts in the tier below, especially if the tush push gets banned. A little more on that here in just a little bit. But Jayden Daniels kind of up there. That's where you expect to get him. It's going to be really interesting because Jayden did a lot of good for me last year. And I think he's going to do a lot of good for whoever has him this year. I typically like to go with a little bit of a wild card at my quarterback position. I don't typically draft quarterback super high. So we'll see how Jayden's climb up the charts will impact my own personal draft strategy. So Fantasy Pros also put out a must-haves list for your fantasy teams this year. No Commanders running backs are on that list. No Commanders rookies are listed among their top 3 in their group for top scoring. But I mean, your first pick is offensive lineman. Your second pick is a corner. Your third pick came on day 3. That's when you finally get a skill position player. So that's not really a huge surprise. If you have an individual defensive player like my crazy league does, typically don't go with corners, right? So Trey Amos, even if you have an IDP, probably not going to be a great option for you. In half PPR leagues, however, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is ranked as running back 103. However, among the Fantasy Pros experts, he was ranked as high as number 69. So clearly, somebody at Fantasy Pros is paying attention to some of the excitement here in Washington about the 7th round rookie. Brian Robinson, running back 30, as high as 21. Ekeler, running back 45, as high as 37. Chris Rodriguez Jr., running back 96, as high as 82. So that's interesting because Chris Rodriguez Jr. comes in higher. His consensus, 96, is higher than Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt at 103. But Rodriguez topped out at 82, while Krosky-Merritt topped out at 69. Interesting stuff there. Jeremy McNichols, the lowest rated Commanders running back that's on the ratings list, number 113 among running backs, as high as 90 overall. I'm going to be honest with you right now. And if anybody in my league is watching this, they're going to get a little bit of a hint to my strategy, but I'm drafting Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt with my last pick. I think that he's going to do some good stuff. I'm excited about it. I plan on drafting with my last pick. We'll see how much noise he makes in the preseason and whether or not I have to do that a little bit earlier than that last pick. But right now, I'm planning on taking it with my last pick. Deebo Samuel, new wide receiver 41 on the Fantasy Pros rankings, as high as number 31. So right inside, like if you have 32 wide receiver ones, now granted, most fantasy leagues, mine included, are 12 teams. So he's not a wide receiver one in that sense. Fringe wide receiver 3, maybe a 2. Honestly, I kind of take him as a wide receiver 2. If you can get him at like the third as the 41st receiver off the board, that's pretty good value, I think. Ja'Cory Brooks, undrafted wide receiver. He is wide receiver 188, as high as 126. Your 4th round draft pick, Jalen Lane, is wide receiver 129, as high up as 80. Also like him. Michael Gallup, coming out of retirement, wide receiver 172, as high as 135. For the returning receivers, Terry McLaurin is wide receiver 16. Luke McCaffrey, wide receiver 110, which is better than Jalen Lane. It is less than Deebo Samuel, obviously. Noah Brown, 126, is actually behind McCaffrey. KJ Osborne, wide receiver 209. Jayden Daniels is the 31st player overall, QB3, and he is the top Washington Commanders player. Zach Ertz is tight end number 20 and number 157 overall on the overall Fantasy Pros big board as of right now. So there's a little bit of a fantasy hint. Again, it's May, right? So we've got some time. We'll see what happens. But as of right now, that's kind of where the Commanders are sitting when it comes to fantasy football. NFL rule changes. Several insiders wanted me to talk about the NFL rule changes. One NFL proposal was passed on Tuesday, and that is the one allowing NFL players to participate in the Olympics. Flag football will be in the Olympics for the first time in 2028. The Olympics coming to Los Angeles. Flag football will be an Olympic sport in those Summer Olympics. NFL players will be allowed to participate. Now, some people think a lot of NFL players are going to participate. Some people think no NFL players are going to participate. Roger Goodell said in one of his statements that the players wanted the opportunity to represent their country. So I think more than a few are probably going to participate. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle this, because Summer Olympics run July 14th to July 30th of 2028. This is a few years down the road, right? But that's right when training camp starts. So it's going to be interesting to see which players decide to miss the first stretch. That could be, honestly, that could be the first week and a half of training camp that they would miss to go to the Olympics. I mean, it's the Olympics, man. Like, you know, I mean, not for nothing, but whoever wins gold in the flag football competition in 2028 is going to be the first, you're going to be the first human beings to ever wear Olympic gold for the sport of football, ever. Like, no human being in history has ever done it. That's pretty amazing, man. That's pretty cool. And, you know, football is an American sport, so America is going to be expected to represent. But I know a lot of, you know, there's American flag football players already who certainly feel like they have a stake in what is going to happen there. So it's going to be really interesting. I don't have a take, to be quite honest with you. And look, you know, 2028, I mean, what is that? 24, 5, 6, 7, 8. That'll be Jayden's 5th year in the NFL. Like, if at that point, if we're worried about him missing a week of training camp, I think we're probably in trouble. I think by then he's kind of in a situation where he can miss a week of training camp, especially for something like the Olympics, right? Like, that's a little bit of it's like Olympics, birth of a child, like, you're all right. You're going to be okay. Another rule on the docket, tush push, right? Originally it was just ban the tush push, just all together, just ban the tush push. Well, there's been some shift in language. I think there's a reason there's been some shift in language. And essentially the shift in language now isn't to ban the quote unquote tush push. What it is to make it illegal for players to push or pull a teammate who receives the ball from under center, or just receives the ball. I think that was the original. I think just any offensive player who has the ball, you can't push them, you can't pull them. You basically can't physically assist your teammates with the ball in their hands. That would essentially get rid of a big part of the tush push. However, we keep the quarterback sneak, which if you're the Philadelphia Eagles and you can just quarterback sneak it better than anybody else, you're still going to be very effective in 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situations, right? Onside kick, playoff seeding still have to be determined at the time of this recording. Onside kick change. The proposal is to allow onside kicks to happen at any time a team is trailing, not just the 4th quarter as it was last season. And I think the team would line up, I think it's at 5 yards closer than they are right now, currently out of 2024. I think there's a 6% onside kick success rate. The NFL wants to make that a little bit higher. They want to make the onside kick a relative play as much as possible. Playoff seeding proposal would stack and rack all NFL teams in the playoffs by their records. So you'd have your division winners. The top division winner would get the bye week, would be the number one overall seed. However, from there, every team would be stacked and racked based on their records. Doesn't matter if you won a division or not, and that is from the start of the playoffs, not after the first round. Nothing. It would be from the jump if the current proposal is the one that is approved. I think the tush push, it's not going to be a ban, but I think the rule to you can't push or pull a player that has the ball is probably going to get passed. I think the onside kick rule probably gets passed. I think the playoff seeding rule does not get passed. I think that's kind of how that is going to go down. Now that we've looked at how the NFL is changing on the field, let's turn our attention to what might be changing on the Commanders roster. With high expectations, we can see some surprise moves. So let's dive into potential trade candidates who might be packing their bags for a new team in 2025. That coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wrapping up today's mailbag episode with a question from Insider Merle, who says, or who asks, and then offers an answer. Who would be a surprise trade of a player for the Commanders that you would not expect? Merle says his would be Sam Cosmi. And this is a conversation that Merle and I had with Sam's injury, you know, especially if the offensive line does well without him. Is there a possibility the Commanders trade him? I would say never, right? Dan Quinn and Adam Peters have both used the phrase, there are no sacred cows on this roster. So I guess nobody is untouchable, essentially. I would be surprised if Sam Cosmi was traded. So it's appropriate to put him in this category. For one, you're asking a team to send you 2026 draft capital for a player that they're not likely going to get a lot of use out of in 2025, right? Being part of an offensive line is more than just getting on the field and standing in line and blocking a dude. Like it's basically a dance. Like it's very, very choreographed. And so, you know, the idea of putting a guy like Sam in there coming off an ACL injury, like, you know, I don't know that teams are going to be too interested in trading for him. They would have to either do it knowing that he's injured, kind of like the Commanders do with Marshawn Lattimore, and be okay with that, or they'd have to do it under the belief that he's healthy. And if he's healthy, I mean, again, if you're in a world where you can expend, where Sam Cosmi is now expendable, I guess your offensive line is doing pretty well. So it's a good problem to have, I suppose. But, you know, he would definitely be a surprise. Three players that I think would surprise me if they were traded, all of them actually coming on offense. Quarterback Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota has some opportunities to talk to some teams in free agency, go fill some backup roles, maybe compete for a starting role, decide to come back, decide to stick with Jayden, decide to stick with Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, all that stuff. I'm super excited that Marcus decided to come back. But, you know, look, at the same time, he's a competitor. He wants to play. You know what I mean? These guys want to play. So if you see a team with a player that goes down, I mean, you know, I hate to kind of go there, but my mind immediately goes to the Minnesota Vikings. And if, you know, J.J. McCarthy, who suffered a torn meniscus last year in the preseason, his very first NFL game, you know, if he proves to be someone who's going to be often injured and he gets hurt again, perhaps the Minnesota Vikings come calling in a situation where Marcus Mariota gets to go up there and fill a starting role. I would hate to see Marcus Mariota on the opposite sideline during that game this year, but that's a situation that could potentially unfold. And depending on how the Commanders feel about Josh Johnson and Sam Hartman, maybe they agree to make that move. Running back Austin Ekeler is another one. I just look at the way that this team is stacked right now. Again, I have high hopes for Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, but I think it would be premature to say that he could be like the number 2 back right now. Certainly, I mean, we saw Brian Robinson go from a 3rd-round pick to being the starting back on this team his rookie year. So, you know, Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt going from being a 7th-round pick to being a role-playing running back, the primary role-playing running back certainly is possible, but Austin Ekeler also brings a lot of other things to the table with his experience. So I think that Austin Ekeler being traded would be a surprise to me. Brian Robinson Jr., I kind of said this before yesterday, we talked about trade candidates, and just because B-Rob's name has come up a lot, we talked about it, but just kind of doubling down on that. I would be very surprised if the Washington Commanders traded Brian Robinson Jr. Away, even with guys like J.K. Dobbins out there, even with guys like Nick Chubb out there, like, unless they go trade. We talked about the Saints potentially being sellers in their market, considering how bad their team is expected to be right now, and just kind of hitting the reset button. If Alvin Kamara were to come over, like, could Alvin Kamara and Brian Robinson and Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt be the 3-headed monster? And now Austin Ekeler gets traded? Yeah. Could Austin Ekeler and Alvin Kamara and Ja'Cory Cross-Kamara be the three-headed monster. Now B-Rob gets traded. Yeah, like that would change things. But as it stands right now, even with Ja'Cory Cross-Kamara potentially having, an impact, I don't know that, even as a rookie, I don't think you just hand the keys over to him right away. You know what I mean? That's something that you'd have to wait and see. So I think that either of those running backs being traded would surprise me. I'm not even going anywhere near guys who aren't getting traded like Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, and Bobby Wagner. So we're not even going to go there. But those are some options who could be surprise trades for me. They're all on the offensive side of the ball. Marshawn Lattimore is somebody on the defensive side of the ball that I think some people would be happy to see him get traded because they wanted a much faster return on that trade. I get it. But I would be very surprised to see the Washington Commanders call that in, especially like early in the season. Like maybe if things aren't working out towards the trade deadline, you're not going to get much for him if that's the case. But maybe you go get a 5th rounder back or something like that for him, or go get a 6th rounder back for him, something like that in that trade. Then maybe it would be more realistic. But yeah, he's probably somebody that a lot of people would be talking about. Daron Payne is a guy we talked about. That wouldn't be a surprise for me. I don't know that I see it happening. I just wouldn't be like shocked if it did happen, to be quite honest with you. So good question from Merle. We've got some more good questions already lined up for our next mailbag episode. That will come either Thursday, pending any more significant news that needs to trump a mailbag episode, or Friday if no news drops on, or Friday if news drops on Thursday and we need to push it back a day. So that's coming up this week on Locked On Commanders. In the meantime, if you have questions or topics that you want discussed on the show, all you got to do is text them over to me. And to do that, all you got to do is become a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to become an insider today. You get to affect the show, but also I get to reach out to you in ways that go beyond the episodes. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but roster moves are always happening. Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino are going to keep you educated on how it all works all year round. Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast, just like this podcast, for free. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Thank you for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind. I'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.